In our culture, we say no bond is more sacred than that between a mother and a child, and no one is more sympathetic than a mother whose child faces a life-threatening illness. But what if the mother is the cause of the illness? What if sympathy is the point? Munchausen by proxy has fascinated and horrified professionals and the general public since the disturbing form of child abuse was first identified. But even as the public has been captivated by these tales of abuse and deception, there remains widespread misinformation and confusion about Munchausen by proxy. Are these mothers unfeeling sociopaths or mentally ill women in need of help? And most importantly, how can we protect the children whose lives are at stake? In today's interview, I'm going to be interviewing the author, one of the authors, of The Mother Next Door, Medicine, Deception, and Muchausen by Proxy, Andrea Dunlop and Mike Weber. Detective Mike Weber is a Texas investigative detective who has worked on more medical child abuse cases than anyone else in the United States. Together with Andrea Dunlop, they document 3 high-stakes Munchausen by proxy investigations unraveling this mysterious form of abuse through riveting reporting and shocking stories from the family members, friends, and doctors caught in the middle of these unthinkable acts. The result is a jaw-dropping work of narrative nonfiction that's truly stranger and more shocking than fiction. And I can tell you, having read the book, this is exactly what it is. I was turning the pages over and over as fast as I could and reading as fast as I could. This is Paul Krauss, of course. You're listening to the Intentional Clinician podcast. All right, let's get to the interview. Hello, Detective Mike Weber. Thank you for coming on to the podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I've been enjoying your recent book that you wrote with Andrea Dunlop, The Mother Next Door, Medicine, Deception, and Munchausen by Proxy. Now, I'm assuming here that a lot of the listeners who just Google Munchausen by proxy might find this episode due to the title, but there's a lot of people who do not know what that is, and they are tuning in just as subscribers. And so maybe we could dive in a little bit, as you've got over 40 years in law enforcement, and then recently have been involved a lot with the Munchausen by proxy situation that has been out there for a long time, but is becoming more of a talking point here. Let's talk about that. Who suffers in Munchausen by proxy? Who's having a hard time?
Well, could be any vulnerable victim, right? So the elderly, the disabled, or children. And now the cases that I have investigated, because I'm a crimes against children investigator, they have all been cases involving children. And the offender in every one of my cases, except one, has been the mother of the child. And in the one that it wasn't the mother, it was the grandmother who had also offended on her own child.
I see, yes. And so I was reading, I believe, in chapter 1, where it was like a massive percentage of people that molest children sexually are male presenting people, and the massive amount of Munchausen by proxy folks usually are the mothers of the children, or the, like you said, grandmother or some sort of caretaker.
There was a literary study done in 2017 that looked at 796 cases of this abuse. 95.6% of the offenders in that literature were the mother of the child. 97.6% were female. Now, Dr. Mark Feldman, psych expert on this abuse, he will tell you that every society he knows of on this earth, the primary medical caretaker for the children is the mother. So, is it something specific to women, or is it just a crime of opportunity? we don't have the research to know.
Right. And it might be difficult to study, like you said, due to the fact that most mothers by default are the medical person, right?
Right. And these offenders are extremely manipulative and also extremely dishonest. So a lot of times outside, especially when you get to the advanced offenders, outside the health of their children. It may be good just to tell the audience.
Let's jump into it.
Yeah, a good working definition of what Munchausen by proxy is. So it's when a caregiver, usually the mother, intentionally, very key words, exaggerates, falsifies, or induces illness in her child. And it can be anywhere along that spectrum at any time. It can be all of them at once. There is no step letter that they have to go through. Mm-hmm. That can also happen in cases, but it's extremely offender specific.
Yes, and that makes sense because we need to make a strong distinction here. There are people that have delusions or delusional disorders where they believe they or their children have been, have some sort of weird tapeworm or, disease or maybe an actual disease, and they obsess over it. And that can cause a lot of harm both to them or their children. But those folks have a different type of treatment because they're not necessarily lying. They believe this to be true, and then they act accordingly. And, the story keeps changing and twisting. Oftentimes, there's some underlying other disorder going on with those folks, whether it is delusional disorder, some sort of psychosis, anxiety, depression that caused them to kind of fixate on this. That's not what we're talking about. So Munchausen by proxy is when somebody is intentionally lying to basically, we're not sure exactly all of their intentions, but a lot of it seems to be focused on getting sympathy or attention from the medical profession or people in their community because they have a sick child, and or gaining financial gains or other things like that. Is that what you would say?
Yeah, the DSM Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Illness, this was put in there in 2013. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, that's the first psych publication to ever apply a diagnosis to the offender. Munchausen by proxy is not a psychological diagnosis in the U.S.
I see.
And they categorize it as factitious disorder imposed on another.
I see.
But if you read what the DSM says about this, it says it has to do with intentional deception, and that it is first and foremost abuse. And, when I interview these offenders, they'll first lie to me. I'll hit them with some additional details. They'll change their story. And then I may get eventually admissions and never the whole truth. Now, that's a good indication that they know what they're doing is wrong when they start out lying to you and then eventually end up telling you facts just opposed to what they had told you an hour earlier. And so, and again, that's an interview of any child sexual abuse suspect I've ever had, abusive head trauma suspect I've ever had. They really present no different in a police interview setting than really any other criminal.
Right. So essentially, yeah. So, and just to define further for the folks at home, there's of course, the factitious disorder where some people make up that they have diseases, but factitious disorder put upon another is basically Munchausen by proxy. And essentially, it's hard to get our minds around why would a parent do this? And really, it is a literal crime. Like you said, it is child abuse. So one of the things that struck me recently was the news keeps reporting so-and-so is caught with child pornography. And and that's, of course, against the law, and people are getting prosecuted for that or making it. But actually, the term is completely wrong. It should actually be child abuse sexual images. Child abuse sexual images, not child pornography, because there's no consent involved in this. So just like this is a criminal activity. Munchausen by proxy is literally, yes, it's diagnosable, right, through factitious disorder imposed upon another, but it actually is a form of child abuse.
Right. And it's diagnosable, but it is a evidence-based diagnosis. The only way to diagnose this, you can't have 3 sessions of talk therapy and say this person does or doesn't have Munchausen by proxy. It is evidence-based. You have to do a complete and thorough medical record review. You you compare the histories that mom gave to every other history that mom gave to see the lies. As a law enforcement investigator, I would get additional evidence, talk to witnesses, friends of mom that she maybe sent text messages to, emails to about the health of the child that are just wildly different than what's actually happening at the doctor's office. I'll get her computers, I'll get her cell phone if I have probable cause, and we'll analyze that. In one of the cases in the book, when we analyzed her computer, we found evidence. Don't want to spoil the book, but we found evidence on her computer that led us to a higher charge, and led us to a poisoning charge. Yeah. So it's a police investigation is very rare in these cases, but it is very, very needed, and we can supply additional evidence. So it is an evidence-based diagnosis. And when I get that evidence, I will then take it to medical professionals, and that will allow them it's additional information they can use to make their diagnosis of abuse.
Yes. There's necessary steps here where, we have to get some sort of child protective services involved, usually. Correct. To protect the children that have been abused. And the hard part about this from reading the book was that oftentimes people around the offender, usually the mother, and in the book, one of the mothers, are so taken by the person, their story, meaning that they believe them. And why wouldn't you believe a mother with a sick child? And I thought about that myself. I was reflecting. I thought, well, gee golly, if a mother with a sick child, was talking to me on Facebook or, telling me, somebody in the community needs a GoFundMe, I might just donate to that without investigating. Well, that would be insulting, right? But again, and so it's interesting because the suspect is somebody that you would not expect, right? Instinctually, we think parents protect their children. And then, of course, we know that, unfortunately, there's a ton of incest cases, where usually the father sexually abuses a daughter or a son. And we've known that, but we sort of see that as some sort of dark, evil person, right? Where in this case, we get that person prosecuted, get them away from the child. But in this case, it's the mother taking this child to hospitals, doctors, and sort of relying on her report of what's going on at home. And when you have a little child, 7 or 8 or under, they don't really speak for themselves medically, right? Yeah. We're relying on the parents' testimony to say, oh, they can't keep food down, they have rashes, they won't sleep, all these things. And so, doctors try all these treatment plans. The treatment plans don't work because the child's not really sick, but the parent wants more procedures for whatever reason.
Right.
And I was thinking about like secondary gain. So the secondary gain, the child's, getting this unnecessary treatment such as feeding tubes and, respirators or whatever, these things that don't even work. Meanwhile, the parent is gaining sympathy and has quite a powerful narrative, I think, to rationalize behaviors that they're doing. In the instance of one person in the book, they had actually lied about hundreds of thousands of things in their life, including that they had a degree. They somehow lied their way into a job that needed that degree, lying about themselves being sick, all to cover up. I'm not sure what. It's kind of hard. As a therapist, I'm really interested in why it started, but it's almost like it started small. There was some issue and just snowballed, and they kept getting away with it. And even their own family was stunned when they found out, and it tore the family in shreds for a while. So yeah, if you want to talk more about this, I think your expertise is you've been investigating these cases. Can you tell us about?
I was given a responsibility. I had retired from Arlington Police Department. I went to the local DA's office as a DA investigator, and we got a case. I went to my boss after I didn't know what to do. There was no template. Worked that case terribly. All the surgeries, which can be the criminal offenses, my charging element, they happened out of state. So we had to transfer it out of state. They did nothing with it. The agency that we transferred it to. And I just went to her after that and said, why don't you assign me any more of these? And that was in 2009. early '09, and shortly after that, about a month after that, I got the first case in the book, the Hope Ybarra case, and you can read the book for all the details on that. But we did end up charging her. And then after, after that first case, I went to my chief prosecutor. I'm like, hey, why don't you just give me any more of these that come in? They're a lot of work. I figured out a few things. I talked to like Dr. Feldman. I talked to Michael Trent, a DA in Houston who had prosecuted a couple. She's like, Mike, that's fine. This first one we've had, I've been in this unit 8 years. I'm like, well, that's great. They're a lot of work. And sure enough, a month later, we get Hope Ybarra. And then from '09 to '15, I investigated 16 reports. We filed 6 criminal cases. 5 pled guilty to child abuse charges. 1 pled guilty to Medicaid fraud. And then the third story in the book will explain why I stopped investigating these cases in 2015. All of these stories are not happy endings. I went to the sheriff's office in 2018. One of those first victims is the second story in the book. The sheriff adopted that little girl after her abuse. And he wasn't the sheriff at the time that I investigated that case, obviously. And he brought me over to the sheriff's office because these cases were still happening and no one was investigating them. And from March of 2019 till I just retired January 2025, I arrested 13 more offenders, and we've had 8 guilty pleas, 3 are pending trial, and 2 dismissals by our DA's office. The learning curve on this abuse is there's a lot to learn. Your viewers or listeners may be wondering, how could a doctor ever do this? After they listen to this episode, they will know more about Munchausen by proxy, medical child abuse, factitious disorder imposed on another, whatever you want to call it. They'll know more about this than their pediatrician will if they've had no exterior training on this, if they haven't caught a training at a conference. They're not trained on this in medical school. They're trained just the opposite. They're trained to trust the caregiver. CPS has no training on this abuse. And the only states I know that have even policies on this abuse are for CPS is Arizona and Arkansas. So they're walking into this blind, and it's a very, very different investigation for CPS and police.
Yeah, so it sounds like basically there's gaps in the system. And so when you were given the responsibility, you worked your hardest and you figured out a lot of these things. It does seem, like you said, there's a massive, not only gap in the system, a blind spot, but a lack of education. So for instance, I'm licensed in multiple states. I'm required to take sex trafficking awareness, and other just cultural awareness classes and things like this, and some substance abuse courses, just to kind of understand a bigger scope of what might come in my office. And I do think that this is something that people should be aware of, and doctors should be aware of. And it sounds like something that states need to look into, because not only is this child abuse, it's also it's manipulating and utilizing the medical system in a wrong way and wasting doctors' time, money, and actually possibly traumatizing the doctors, who might feel horrible that they performed, a PICC line on a child with no disorder. It's against the medical oath. Plus, the poor children are suffering with all this, psychological and physical damage that's being imposed by the caretaker. So it's a tough pill to swallow. I think culturally, that we kind of give certain figures in our culture a pass, because most of them, like most mothers, are taking their child to the doctor for legitimate reasons, right? And so then all of a sudden we have these situations that you write about and you've been privy to that are just horrendous, right? And they're thick and they're complicated, and so it does. Makes a lot of sense to me that the education is needed, and you and your co-author are talking about this publicly. And like you said, there are no tests for this. Like, the diagnosis comes from the evidence, not from me having a theory, about
Right.
somebody. So I like, and it does require court record review, like you said. So that being said, what are some things that you would like listeners to know? Because this is information that I believe needs to get out there to the public.
Yeah. So in Texas, for instance, our pediatricians are required to take an hour of a continuing education a year on sex trafficking. Right.
Yeah.
They're required to take nothing on this. We tried to get a bill passed, Texas House Bill 2826 in the 2025 regular session, just for an hour of CLE on this abuse for the disciplines that need it. And we couldn't even get a committee hearing on it. There is a pushback against this. I think it's very important to understand how manipulative these offenders are. And they will hide in certain groups and then manipulate those groups to their defense, right? So, for instance, oh, well, they're only accusing me of this because I'm homeschooling my child. This could be you, right? Or because I have a medically fragile child. This could be you. Or because I'm anti-vaccine. This could be you. And they use those groups, probably well-intending people, right? But they get them on their side. Church groups, the Danita Tutt case in Tarrant County, her entire church group, congregation showed up in the courtroom to support her. And she was convicted of attempted murder and injured a child serious bodily injury. So it's just the lack of education. We're from an education's perspective, we're at about where we were in the 1960s on child sexual abuse, 1990s on human trafficking on this abuse. And the internet, if you were going to commit this in 1992, you'd have to go, and you had no medical knowledge, you'd have to go to a library. If you look at research from before the internet, they say that it's most likely going to be a nurse or someone with medical knowledge who commits this. Now, with the internet, that's out the window. You can Google the symptoms you need to present in 5 minutes and walk into a doctor's office and present them. A doctor's going to see the child for 10, 15 minutes. They're going to rely on that history, as they're taught in medical school to do. And these offenders are very, very good. I used to think, why do they all do the same thing? Why are we seeing so many feeding tubes in kids and so many gastric issues? And then, when I start to talk to doctors, well, you talk to a gastroenterologist, they'll tell you, well, 95 to 99% of my diagnosis is based on the history provided by the caregiver. They pick things intentionally that are hard to medically test for. And that's why we see seizure disorders. That's why we see gastric issues, food allergies. We see these, when all of these are together, we start to see a bunch of red flags start to pop up. And we see them posting all the time on social media about the health of their child. A lot of times there'll be volumes of pictures. The second story in the book, Brittany Phillips, she had each hospitalization, there was a volume of pictures, and the pictures were never centered on the child's face. It was always centered on the medical intervention. So a picture of the stomach when there's a fresh G tube in, and I'm talking specifically in her case. And Dr. Mark Feldman, y'all may not like the term, but he calls that medical pornography when they post pictures of that online. And they do it, again, for the attention fix. And again, the social media provides that fix. That second story in the book, she didn't have any real friends in life. Her entire friendship base was social media. She had online friends. And so now you've got the means to commit this at your fingertips, and the what's the word I'm looking for? Satisfaction element, for lack of a better word, also at your fingertips, right? So I think we've seen, and I think we are slowly, extremely slowly, getting better at identifying this as a society. Very slowly. There are certain groups now that are coming out. Munchausensupport.com provides support to previous victims, family members of victims, through just support groups. And things. And my co-author started that organization. It's literally the first organization that helped victims in this abuse anywhere in the United States. And that's kind of where we're at here. We are really in the frontier, I'll call it, of child abuse investigations when we're out here on this. And it takes, if it's a falsification, if mom's just falsifying symptoms and you have to put all those pieces together in a criminal investigation, that could be an 8-month investigation. Who's going to do that? Who's going to take the time to do that? Who's going to have the time to do that? And that's how come you see a lot of human nature involved in this, where police just shrug their shoulders. They don't know what this is. They don't know what to do. So they just classify it as a CPS issue. And CPS, same way.
That's disappointing that CPS is not stepping up, because, I mean, I understand where maybe the police are confused if they don't have like a detective unit that is trained in this. But I do think if they refer to CPS, CPS has a responsibility to. But again,
you have to provide your people training. I have given Arizona's policies to the CPS administration in my state on 4 different occasions. They have done nothing. You know, big state agencies are reactive. I've said for a long time, for anything to change in my state on this abuse, what it will take is a very high-profile death of a child that is from a very wealthy or powerful family, and that death is discovered, and then that family is upset about it. Then we'll have something maybe, and it stays in the news cycle for multiple months. Then maybe we'll have something happen. But I mean, I've given it, and I can't blame a 25-year-old CPS worker who has no training on this, who gets sent out to a medical neglect call because they don't have a box to check for medical child abuse in my state, right? When it gets reported, they have nothing to check. So she gets sent out to a medical neglect call, gets there. Mom's like, I don't know what. Yeah, I'll talk to you. I'm taking my kid to the doctor all the time. Here are all the, and what is that worker going to do? Because she's got 40, 50 cases on her caseload. And she doesn't have any training. She doesn't know what this is. It's a medical neglect case to her. She's going to just unfound it and go on her way. I mean, I've had the second case in the book was reported 4 different times to CPS. And the 5th time is when it came to us.
Yeah, I understand, because in CPS, neglect is less obvious, but obviously malevolent treatment or violent treatment of children is more obvious, right? Where this is like, I'm trying to help, and it's difficult to discover. And you're right, no training. I was trained in Maricopa County, Arizona behavioral health systems, and I have to say, and I've been trained in Illinois and also Michigan, and Arizona by far has some of the best training for social workers, counselors, and CPS workers that I've ever been privy to, and it's especially Maricopa County itself. And I have no idea why. I actually have no idea. I thought that I don't know why Arizona is this way. I don't know who's in charge that made it this way. It seems like under every governor, it's the same. So I think the state really emphasizes foster care, child abuse, child neglect, and it's good for me to know that they actually have training on Munchausen's, which makes sense, because the other states I've been in are very lacking. And I wonder, not that this is maybe where you want to go with the conversation, but I wonder if there's something about, like you said, that your state of Texas, you know that well, but in Michigan also slow moving, like culturally, like the awareness isn't there to garner the political support, versus in Arizona, 50% of people from Arizona are from other states are kind of remaking their life. That makes me kind of wonder if that is why the culture in Arizona doesn't really resist this sort of training, like maybe Texas or Michigan might.
Well, and there's a big pushback in my state, by the parents' rights folks on not just on this abuse and other forms of abuse also. And it's, there's tons of reasons for that I believe that don't really want to go into.
Yeah, we don't need to go into that. Yeah.
Yeah, but they they have power in the state legislature. And when your state legislature, we've been 4 sessions trying to get laws passed on this, and we can't get anything done there. And we're going to keep trying. And, but I do think it's going to take a high profile death to change things. Now, the interesting thing, we talk about CPS and police. even if they do their jobs, it's still got a family court judge has got to separate that child. We need a separation period so we can see if what this child really does have and really doesn't have. If we get that separation, in most of my cases, what I've seen is, the child recovers with either no or very minor medical issues, right? But we have to have that separation period. And the last article in the Juvenile and Family Court Journal on this abuse, which goes out to judges, family court prosecutor, or family court attorneys, was in 1990.
Wow.
They God bless them, they are lost on this. And your standard family court or juvenile court hearing is an hour to 2 hours long. That's all the time the judge is going to give you. So you can't do this in an hour or 2 hours. You just simply can't. And so, you can see cases fall apart there. You can see them fall apart at your criminal prosecutor's office if again, for the same reasons we talked about with CPS and police. There's just no education.
Right. And so, okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think it sounds like you're trying to bring more education to the public, and podcasting and writing books are really good ways to do that. Yeah, I mean, I think I'm trying to figure out, without spoiling the book, how to explain the level of deviancy or something to the listener. I guess maybe to kind of digest this, I actually think you do need to read the book. So I'm going to put that out there. Read the book. You'll understand it more by hearing the story fully fleshed out. Podcasts are like what I call like a sample at Costco. You just get a little sample. But
right.
The idea here is that the person, and this is my opinion from reading your book as a therapist, the person has some unmet need. The mother usually has some unmet need in her life. And instead of self-reflecting and getting help for that issue, she finds that by falsifying her own health, but in this case, Munchausen by proxy or fictitious disorder put onto another, the health of their child, they're able to gain attention and sympathy, which is somehow filling a void of something in their life that they want. And then they just keep going with it and keep going with it. And to keep a child sick, especially children, unless they have a genetic disorder, or something very severe going on, very young, a lot of children are actually quite healthy and resilient. They bounce back as long as they've been getting proper care. So to keep a child sick who's not sick requires a lot of devious planning and straight up lying in interesting, in strange ways, because in some ways it's not the delusion, but it's almost like the person knows it's wrong, but they're kind of putting it on a shelf or something. It's kind of what I was reading in the book. What are your thoughts on that?
That's Andrea's thoughts, and that's some of the professionals' thoughts.
Okay.
To me, I think it depends on the level of the offender. I think they all know what they're doing. The problem with relying on them telling you that, you're relying on them telling you that. Right. And these offenders are inherently dishonest. And that just may be a way of them just simply coping or, an excuse for their behavior. Probably the truest thing I've ever had these offenders tell me, and it's happened in 2 or 3 interviews, is that they're either pathological liars or habitual liars. I've had them use both of those terms. And they'll lie. The advanced offenders, like the first story in the book, Hope Yabar lied about having a PhD. The third story in the book, she lied about being a nurse. And interestingly, continues to lie about being a nurse because she's not in jail and she never went to jail. And she's an elected politician in the state of Texas.
Okay.
You haven't got to that third story.
I haven't read that one, but are you allowed to talk about that one?
Sure. Yeah.
No, don't spoil it, but tell us what happened here, because this is really interesting to me.
Yeah. In that case, the allegation was that she had a unneeded brain shunt placed in her son's head. She had pretended to be a NICU nurse. She had told doctors she was a NICU nurse. She used that leverage. She couldn't get it placed in Texas, so she went to Minnesota. told them, oh, Texas just couldn't do the surgery. She found a doctor that I believe was looking for the zebra and not the horse. If you understand that medical analogy, which is, if you hear hoof prints, look for horses, not zebras. I asked him, it was a normal, the diagnosis was normal pressure hydrocephalus, which he made solely based on Mary's history when I interviewed him, the offender's history, Mary Welch. And when I interviewed him, I asked him, because normal pressure hydrocephalus is normally seen in like older people when the brain starts to shrink. Elderly people, not older, but elderly.
I get you.
And I asked him, well, how many children have you seen this in? And he's like, well, I've seen it in 3 cases. And, my immediate thought is, well, 1/3 of your case is suspected of being medical child abuse. So maybe you should look at the other 2. When 33% of your sample may be corrupt, maybe you need to go back and check out those other 2. And these offenders, speaking in general, these offenders will pursue like these rare diagnoses, again, that are hard to medically test for. And so she got a brain shunt placed in his head. 2 DA's offices pointed at each other. The surgery was done in Minnesota. And she was indicted here. We elected a new DA. And y'all read the story about why the case got dismissed. But basically, 2 DA's offices pointed at each other. No one did anything. And she was convicted of Medicaid fraud. But it was a misdemeanor. She pled it down. They pled it down to a misdemeanor. And she's now mayor pro tem of Grandview, Texas, and on the Johnson County Central Appraisal District Board. So a Medicaid fraudster has access to everyone's Social Security number who lives in Johnson County, Texas, that owns property.
Okay, yeah, this is a tough topic because not only is it needed education. Go ahead.
Yeah, I want to be very clear. She was not found guilty by jury.
Yeah,
she was indicted, and that was dismissed by prosecutorial discretion. I don't believe anyone involved in that dismissal ever actually read the evidence.
So she was the allegedly done this, yes. But in the book it gets into more detail, but it sounds like you're talking again about political pressure or some sort of cultural pressure that overturns straight up logic and facts. And that is a tough thing to fight for the evidence and the truth when you're investigating something. And this is probably not only that case, but in general, the perpetrators in Munchausen by proxy are often viewed as upstanding citizens. They're mothers. They're not going out. Right. They don't carry knives and guns on them and have tattoos I'm doing a stereotype, but in people's minds, the criminal is a stereotype of somebody who doesn't look like them. Right. And so especially, a mother with a child, like you don't think that they're capable of, but people are capable of anything. And I think that in psychology, I've learned that over 18 years of my career is that human behavior is the whole range, right? Most people end up in kind of the middle range, and that's why we don't hear about them on the news. But there are people that live near you in your neighborhood right now that are an extreme behavior of some type of behavior, whether it be drug abuse, alcohol, gambling, lying, cheating, whatever it is. And in this case, doing horrible things to their children in the name of a cure, right? Or some sort of medical intervention. These things happen, and I also think our society doesn't want to hear that. I don't think we want to hear that. I mean, like you said, the child abuse thing. It took, I don't even know how many years. I test my history, but even in the early 90s, people didn't want to hear about it. Right? Suicide. The suicide hotline was dismissed to become a national hotline many times in the 90s, many times throughout the whole 1990s, because the politicians said, oh, well, that's not that many people. It doesn't affect my constituents, right? And it wasn't until the statistics were continually and people got louder and louder and louder that the National Suicide Prevention Hotline was launched. And now it's, helping reduce the number. So this again, is like you said, there are, because of the difficulty of investigating and prosecuting and bringing to justice the offenders, there's not that many cases to draw from. But my guess, and I don't know, I don't want to make you guess on air, but my guess is that there's a lot more of this going on than we know about, and maybe degrees of severity as well.
Yeah, and I won't guess for you. I've already given you my numbers, and that's in one Texas county.
Yeah.
Just from 19 to 25, 13 arrests, eight guilty pleas, 3 cases pending. But there's a study out of Seattle Children's 2022 study. They historically looked over 5 years of 100, I think it was 145 reports of this abuse or concerns of this abuse. And they had a panel. Everyone had on the panel. They did it strictly by medical record review. So they didn't have external evidence that police can provide. And everyone on the panel had to agree it was medical child abuse. And of those 145 cases, they were able to confirm 65 cases as medical child abuse. And there was another 32 they couldn't confirm. You couldn't say yes or no on. And there was police involvement, police investigation. I talked to Carol Jenny, who was one of the authors on that study. There's police involvement in one of those cases. So, and that was 2/3 the amount of abusive head trauma they had in the same time period. So we have numbers.
Yeah.
We certainly have numbers and studies on frequency. One study on frequency, right?
Right.
But just knowing what I know, and there are cases that for me to file a criminal case, I have to have probable cause for the DA's office to take it and prosecute it. They got to believe they can get it beyond a reasonable doubt. And there are, I have one case where mom would go to the doctor continually and say, my child has cystic fibrosis, seeking treatments for cystic fibrosis. The kid had been tested 3 times, didn't have cystic fibrosis. But the presumptive for cystic fibrosis is you put a cotton patch on the child's arm, you send the child off to play with mom for 30 minutes. Child comes back, you test the sweat. If it's over a certain salt level, then you're concerned for cystic fibrosis. Well, it's not a crime to falsify illness in your child in my state, right? And I have to have something done to the child. I either have to have mental impairment or bodily injury, and that's neither. Oof. So I got no case. Come back to me after you do something.
Right. So essentially we have to the structure of the laws aren't even in place in a lot of states to even cover this.
There is no criminal law specific to this abuse in any state in the United States.
Okay.
There are some child torture laws. Minnesota just got a conviction. Her name was Jordan Borders on a Munchausen by proxy case under their child torture law. I talked to the people who wrote that law, and I'm like, man, this is written really well for Munchausen by proxy. Did y'all plan it that way? They're like, nope, never crossed our mind. It just happenstancely happened. And she got 39 years under that new law in a pretty liberal state.
Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds like that is interesting. Yeah. I think it's clear, like the child torture argument, actually, I was thinking about people moving the needle. If you could get a similar law, that one, I feel like parents would get behind, right? The problem is, and then that would easily, like you said, it might cover the Munchausens because that is torture. By putting a child through unnecessary medical procedures, I would consider that torture. And they don't get to live a normal life. That sounds horrible to me. So that's an angle. That's an angle.
Yeah. And much of this time, this abuse is over multiple years, right? This is long-term abuse of the kids. So it's going to meet your child torture definitions.
Yeah. And it's just, it's a really unfortunate thing. I think the reality, frontline workers, so police, detectives, firefighters, and medics and these sort of things, they see the front lines of what actually happens versus what I think it's just what we want to believe. People don't want to see all that, right? It's hard. It's us working in the fields. We see it. It's normal to us, but a lot of folks, they don't know it. So it's like, how do we, this isn't a question. This is a rhetorical question. How do we, I think education is partly the answer. I know that you said that the whole season 6 of Nobody Should Believe Me, your publicist sent me this, about systematic approaches to this abuse, that it has a lot of education. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, season 6 is a terrible case out of Georgia. The offender was caught poisoning her child over 50 times on covert video, putting feces in the child's tracheotomy to cause a blood infection, and then squirting water down the tracheotomy to basically waterboard the child or suffocate the child. That child was around 18 months old, maybe a little bit younger. That happened 22 years ago. They handled it terribly. The CPS records actually say she will be cured of 6 months of Munchausen by proxy. Not the way it works. They did. She was prosecuted, but she was given 6 months in some facility, and then released. They did take both girls away and placed. They did a proper placement with her parents, who believe she was guilty, which is very important with placement for CPS people. You can't place with any family member that believes they are not guilty. You're going to have Munchausen by proxy. So she gets out. She waits 2 years. She has a baby boy. She has a newborn baby boy. She goes to court and gets all of her kids returned by a family court judge, even with the evidence of the previous poisoning. She starts in on the little boy. Again, he has a central line, starts getting blood infections, with quite possibly a CPS report in Georgia. She then moves to Alabama, finds a neurologist to diagnose this child with a rare neurological condition that's non-fatal. Somehow uses that to get the little boy placed in hospice, cuts off his food and water, and he dies. And there's not been a police investigation into that little boy's death. We are working to try to make that happen, but that is going to be up to Alabama law enforcement. And it is eye-opening, I think, for everyone about these offenders. After the baby died, she then went on for his rare neurological condition. She then went on to lead the Guthrie Jackson 501c3, the Guthrie Jackson Foundation, which is dedicated to that rare neurological condition. She was the director of patient care advocacy, and she would give presentations to doctors and hospitals nationwide. And they had no idea about her criminal history. So they did, when my co-author Andrea also does a podcast, and when my co-author Andrea reached out to them, they immediately fired her. But they haven't really come out with a statement to their constituents. They basically just erased her and pretended like it didn't happen. There needs to be a criminal investigation in that case, but that's up to Alabama law enforcement. There's a lot of, in that podcast, there's a lot of educational episodes with Dr. Mark Feldman, Dr. Mary Sanders, Dr. Catherine Ayub, that I think are very helpful, especially to psych professionals who are going to see this. I've seen reports come back from psych professionals, again, who do 3 sessions of talk therapy and declare to family court that mom doesn't have Munchausen by proxy. You can't do that, right? But they've just been manipulated by mom. Again, like Andrea says in her podcast, people believe their eyes.
Yeah.
Mom presents well.
I see it in our field. Our field's getting a little bit better about this. I see that sometimes clients want us to sign off on documents that is out of our scope of practice. And
right.
If you're somebody's therapist, just in general, you cannot be objective in reporting to the court. You can tell them what was reported to you, right? You can supply notes and testimony in that, but you can't. It's very difficult to write an objective report when you have that relationship, which is why oftentimes whenever somebody's asking clinicians to write something, I would say, if it's in your scope, yeah, you can write it if it's not a huge impact. But if they need to be evaluated for some sort of job issue or an injury issue, you got to go to an objective testing place that does a written test or observational test.
And
you're right.
even those in this abuse are pretty workless.
Yeah.
If they know,
I was
yeah.
talking about the lower level of the manipulation.
Yeah.
And I think the hard part is the clinician and the doctor. We, as a therapist and friends that have doctors, and my wife's a doctor, they want the whole idea is to help people. And when somebody's in distress, you want to help them. And especially with a child, you the last thing in your mind is that the mom or the parent would be doing this to harm them, right? And so I think that is that's where the education's got to come in. And that looking, the hard part about the medical record. But I think that I don't know how that place, I think it was Seattle, did the medical review. I think more of that needs to occur. And I think especially with, if your insurance is paying for everything, but it doesn't seem like that matters to the offenders. They've gone into medical debt. Their whole life is a giant mess around this. They start a foundation. It's all about the attention.
Right. And about 80% of my offenders, they're using Medicaid.
Okay.
So
right.
the taxpayers are actually paying for it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's easier to get it paid for that way. Okay, yeah. So I feel like this has been quite educational. Right now, it seems like you're doing a lot of, I guess, educational advocacy, I would call it.
Do a lot of training on this.
Trainings.
Also.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you training police departments and things on this?
I train any discipline that's connected to this abuse. I'm doing a training in South Carolina next month. Doing one for the Major County Sheriff's Association in Dallas-Fort Worth coming up. One in Boise, Idaho for a child advocacy center. One for a hospital in Rockford, Illinois. Those are in October. So, I tailor my trainings to whatever group I'm speaking to. If it's CPS, I'll talk more about CPS issues. I'll cover everything, but I hit on the discipline that I'm mainly talking to.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's excellent. I'm hoping that this book and your work and the other folks that are involved in the community of helping the survivors can maybe. I mean, that's what it's going to take. It's going to take awareness being raised, and because the children are, the huge victim here. And I haven't, in the book, it didn't, from the half of the book that I read, I didn't know what ever happened to the children. It looked like they recovered, a couple of them, but with minor issues. But I think as a therapist, I would wonder psychologically how damaging that would be to somebody whose own parent did this to them, and damaging on their whole worldview and their kind of narrative of self. So I think that if you sometimes in the U.S. I like to make the economic argument. A person who is a healthy citizen has now been disabled unnecessarily in a crime, and now cannot participate civilly or economically in society, or will have a more difficult time, right? Because we know from the ACEs study, the Adverse Child Experiences study, children that have child abuse, and that was mostly looking at sexual, physical, or hearing or witnessing it, have way more likely to be addicted to cigarettes, have weight issues, have heart issues, addicted to drugs, a lot more of these issues just from the ACEs study with Kaiser Permanente. And I think we're still in the investigation stage. Like you said, we're like behind, we're needing to just get the education out to even get the studies done. But I wonder about the longitudinal studies of people that have experienced this as a child, what their life is like. And I can't believe it would be very good.
And I think, I think some of my colleagues, I'm on the American Professional Society of Abuse of Children's Munchausen by Proxy Committee. I think a couple of them are working on a long-term victim study to kind of see what those consequences are. But, I think my experience has been, if you can get separation and no contact with the suspect early in their life, they tend to recover, pretty well. And now we don't have any real long-term data on my cases, right? Because I just started this in 2009. But I know the sheriff's daughter. I see her pretty consistently, and she is a firecracker. That, of course, this was a kid at 3. The day after she was removed from her mom, is like, I don't need my mommy anymore. I kid all the. I mean, that's saying something. I kid. There's no bond there, right?
No.
And I kid all the time. She was trying to upgrade at the mom position, right away.
Right.
And that kid to this day is she's a firecracker. Sheriff thinks she's going to do great things. She's 4'11" and was the best defensive player on her basketball team. So, yeah, that kid, she's just about to graduate high school, and I think she's going to advocate on this. The law in Texas was Alyssa's law that we've been trying to get passed is named after her.
Oh, wow.
To actually make this abuse a actual criminal violation.
Yeah. Well, go ahead.
Well, no, I was just going to say, and if people are interested in training, you can contact me at MikeWeberConsulting.com. Weber with 1B.
Yep, and I will be putting Mike Weber Consulting and the Munchausen support group in the show notes for everyone who wants to get involved. And I definitely think, I don't know, but I get emails from people that they're impacted by this. So if by other issues. So I'm wondering if you know somebody or you're worried about somebody, this episode might hopefully lead you to find more education. Share it with people you know. Share Mike's website and the Munchausen support website, and get more involved.
My message to people is if you suspect this abuse, you report this abuse, and please report to both CPS and police, just because of the lack of education. And you report and hope one of them kind of gets it.
That's excellent. Yeah, I was going to ask you what your parting words were, and I think that's very important. And when in doubt, as a clinician, I get this question all the time. As a clinician who's been a therapist, I say, should I call CPS? I say, if you have a question, if you should call CPS, you should call CPS right now and let them decide. You don't decide.
And to pediatricians out there, because I've seen pediatricians think that they have to prove this weirdly. That is not your job. That is law enforcement and CPS's job. We are terrible at it. I will admit that currently, but your only job is to report, and don't ever testify that you're an investigator. You're not. You're making a medical diagnosis.
Right.
And law enforcement and CPS investigate the crime.
Absolutely. Yep. And law enforcement and CPS, especially with Munchausen's, because of the difficulty of proving it. With the right investigation, obviously, you could see that it was proven multiple times, but it took a lot due to the laws being out of date or not even existing, rather, about this. So I think I'm glad that there's people out there advocating for this. And I'm hoping, if you're looking for, like I always say at my podcast, if you're looking for a cause, there are causes. You can join one of them, and that will probably make your life better, honestly, if you get involved in something. So yeah, I really appreciate your time, Mike. Is there anything we didn't get to cover that you wanted to put out there?
No, I think that's it. I will say on season 6, one thing I've got to say about that, the original victim, the daughter who was poisoned, she is still living in mom's home. She's still manipulated by mom, under mom's psychological control, and she has a newborn and a toddler. It has been reported to Georgia CPS. They have not removed her from that house, even with that prior conviction.
Wow.
And that's kind of where, that's a good example of where we're at on this abuse and just how misunderstood it is.
Yeah. It's seeming that the education has got to be there, because it seems like what I'm hearing is people are either afraid of it or don't want to look at it or can't understand it. And like tough truths in life, it sometimes takes more than one attempt to really get people to, especially a judge or somebody who's in charge, to be able to even understand this, right? Cultural differences, age differences. And again, like we said, it's not rare, but it seems rare, right? Like you said, like it's not something that makes the news often unless it's like a huge case. So I think the book, The Mother Next Door, is the book that will also be in the show notes, by Andrea Dunlop and Mike Weber. And I think it's a powerful book because I read a lot of books for podcasts, and I like books a lot. But I read this fast, and I usually take my time. I'll tell you what, I'm going to finish it this weekend. But it's a page turner. So
hang on for the ride.
I was like, I couldn't stop reading it last night. So, all right, Mike. Well, thank you so much for your time, and appreciate your work. Keep it up.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
The weeds are here. I walk the perimeter for clue. Mile after mile, passed under my shoes. I walked until my head was sore. Who removed the cellar door? The cellar door. There I was, Niagara Falls, looking down the liquid walls. I was not alone. You were there.
And there you have it. This has been another episode of the Intentional Clinician podcast. If you are enjoying the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes or share the show with people you know. I would surely appreciate it. As some of you know, I am passionate about preventing future violence in the United States. I have started a nonprofit with colleagues called the National Violence Prevention Hotline, which is a 501c3 organization. We are endeavoring to gain funding and collaborators and volunteers so that we can start a 24/7 hotline and chat line to reach potential perpetrators before they may act violently. It is a bold effort to curb violence and save innocent lives by working to connect with potential offenders while they are in the planning stages of violence, help to de-escalate them, and provide resources so that they can get appropriate professional help. The National Violence Prevention Hotline is looking to open up a conversation about violence in society, the causes, and the solutions. You can learn more by visiting our website at violencepreventionhotline.org. You can get involved by writing your congressperson from our website, sharing it with your network, or even donating to the cause. If you are looking for an EMDR International Association consultant, I am a consultant and I can help provide 20 hours that you need to become EMDRIA certified. Just check out the show notes and send me a message and see if we're a good fit to work together. If you are in need of counseling, do not hesitate to make an appointment with a local counselor in your area. You can also make an appointment with the excellent clinicians at Health for Life Counseling in Grand Rapids as part of the Trauma Informed Counseling Center of Grand Rapids by visiting www.healthforlifegr.com. And if you are in the state of Michigan, you can also schedule a telehealth appointment. The recording you just listened to consists of the personal opinions of Paul Krauss and his guest, and while these are based upon the literature they have read and the experience in their respective fields, the information on this podcast should not be viewed or thought of as the definitive opinion on any subject. Listening to this podcast is not a substitute for treatment. If you're in a crisis, please call 911 or the National Crisis Line at 988. Support your local bookstore by shopping at bookshop.org. That's www.bookshop.org. It donates a percentage of sales to local bookstores all across the United States, which I think gives character to our cities and a place to hang out and a place to explore. You can order from the comfort of your own home online while supporting businesses near you. If you are a therapist and you are not involved in your local counseling or therapist or social work organization, please get involved to at least pay dues so that we can have lobbyists help keep mental health care accessible at the government level, and also expanding into schools and other places that need it. And also, if you didn't know, counseling organizations and professional organizations are working to keep us from becoming gig workers for a lot of large corporations who are coming in and trying to buy up local counseling agencies or basically pay you what they pay for people to deliver food to your house. So, get involved. Until next time on The Intentional Clinician, I wish you all a safe and peaceful week.